The rainbow jersey fiasco at Rugby League Club Manly was a masterclass in how not to impose cultural change on your organisation, Maria Slade writes in this week's Flipside. Now, you're saying it never needed to get to this point. How so?
One of the crucial mistakes Manly made was trying to launch an inclusivity exercise without including people. They apparently only told the players themselves a day or two before the crucial match against the Roosters. And so these players that were not comfortable with it were put in a pretty difficult position. And they're professional sports people. It's not like they don't want to play. But they come from these very conservative Christian backgrounds. And I guess they felt it was, they had to stand by their conscience. But, then they were letting the team down. So it was an invidious position. And if Manly had conducted some kind of exercise of actually talking to them prior to this, it may never have reached this point. They are in a difficult position in terms of this cohort of people. Something like half the Australian League are of Pacifica backgrounds. And as we know, a lot of these young men do come from very conservative Christian backgrounds and are very sort of strong in their culture and feel they have to sort of, uphold their community and so forth. So it was always going to be a hard sell. But if you don't even bother to talk to people, you're sort of making a rod for your own back. I mean, what did Manly think was going to happen when they imposed this at the last minute upon this group of young players?
Do you think the club bosses get it now?
I'm not entirely sure that they do. I think the coach, Des Hasler, has been a real leader in this, actually. He did this whole sort of mea culpa speech, as we know, where he apologised to just about everybody, from the queer community to the players to the fans to the sporting community, everybody. And, some of the experts I've spoken to said, well, he had to do that, really. The first thing you've got to do when there's a mess like this is you've got to own it. And a lot of corporates don't even do that when they get themselves into a tricky situation. So he did display real leadership in doing that. But the club's millionaire owner, Scott Penn, I don't know that he does. I mean, he runs a mega wellness technology business based in the States. He's very wealthy. And he did actually make the comment that, well, if we had a bit more time, we might have been able to sort something like this out. But again, look, why would you not think this was going to be a problem, given the group of players that you're dealing with? Someone like him that runs a big organisation with lots of employees surely would be aware that, today's workforce is more diverse than it's ever been, and you have to be cognizant of these kinds of sensitivities if you're going to try and affect change.
So if this scenario was transplanted into a workplace setting, how do you think it would play out?
Well, this is one of the points that people I spoke to made. You have to remember that these players, they may be elite sports people who are incredibly well paid, and in that they're a very small group of people, but they're still Gen Z. And Gen Z does not take kindly to being told what to do. The days of saying jump and younger employees say how high have long gone. These people like to be included in things that affect them. And so if you translate that to a workplace situation, particularly in this era of the Great Resignation, where workplaces are short on skilled labour, if you were to do something like that to some of your younger cohort, they wouldn't muck around. They'd just get up and leave and go and find themselves another job. So it's quite a salient lesson, I think, if you translate that from the sporting situation to the workplace situation.
How do you think New Zealand compares perhaps with Australia in terms of LGBT rights?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Just as this whole thing was blowing up, New Zealand Story, which is the government agency that promotes branding of New Zealand, they put out some new research. It was actually an update on research they did about 2015, looking at how the Australians perceive New Zealanders, because of course they're our biggest trading partner, so we're interested. And one of the things that came out is the Australians have a sort of growing sense of admiration for New Zealand because they think we're more tolerant and more inclusive and more progressive in some ways, and our attitude towards the LGBT plus community was called out specifically. But given that 3 of these 7 Manly players were New Zealanders, it's I don't know, some would argue that that's not the case, but others I've talked to say that, yeah, we do have a bit of an edge. And that's interesting in the context of this. You have to remember that the Australians only legalised same-sex marriage in 2017, and that followed a very contentious referendum in which great chunks of West Sydney, which is a real rugby league heartland, voted against legalising same-sex marriage. So there are sectors of their community who've got a way to go and, are maybe not as far down the journey as New Zealand is. But I think, look, at the end of the day, one thing the NRL are now talking about a pride round, but I think they just need to be pretty cognizant of the fact that this isn't a box-ticking exercise. It's just like, isn't like diversity tick, sell a few rainbow jerseys tick. We're talking about real people's lives here. So, it's important.
Maria, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.